Hello, and welcome to Learning Music with Pat. I'm going to work with you in terms of some scales and fingerings of scales today, and talking to you about the way that scales are written. And it's kind of an extension of what I did on the last segment. But if you look at this chart right here, we'll start working with these charts. These are the keys that the recorder plays. The key of C, the key of D, the key of G, and the key of F. Now, I sometimes can make it play in a couple of extra keys, but we're talking about a C melody recorder. It's written to play in C, and you start off with the C, and I've gone one octave, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and then back down the octave to the original note. Now, a recorder is a two-octave instrument. It can get to a high C. I'm not bothering with that today. I just want to teach you some basics. And since I'm doing the show and nobody's sitting here beside me that I'm showing something, I don't know what your skill level is. So I want to keep it basic, mainly because I think it's best if you want to learn. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. No sharps and no flats. It's just an all-natural key. Now, the recorder can play C sharp and F sharp. That's the key of D. So you keep the F sharp and you add the C sharp to it. So you start off with D because the key is D, and D is going to be the root note. So D, E, F sharp, and I'd put them in so you could see them, but basically I wouldn't have to put them in, because if it's already written in the key signature, then you go by the key signature. Whenever you play a piece, always check the time signature and the key signature so you know what notes are supposed to be flatted or sharp. But for the sake of instruction, I have written it in so you know where they come. So you have the D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D, there's your octave, high D, low D, and then back down to the C sharp, and then B, A, G, F sharp, E, and F. Now, the G is also quite easy to play. These are not hard to play, and the recorder can do it. They can't do a lot else, but a lot of music is written in those keys, so you can play a lot of music with them. Okay, so in the key of G, you just have the F sharp. And you start on the G, that's the root note. It's the second line up, G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, back to the F sharp, then E, D, C, B, A, G. Now with the F, you don't get people playing so much in terms of F with the recorders, but they can do it, and it's the B that's flatted. It's not sharp, it's flatted. I have put those in. F, which is the root note because the key is in the key of F. F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, F, E, D, and C, and then the B flat, A, G, F. Those are the keys that you normally play. Now, when you write scales, I'll just flip this over, you write them from left to right. Let's look at the bottom one. You have your scale, it starts as low as it's going to, it progresses to a high point, and then it progresses back down again. We read from left to right. We read all of our literature from left to right. We also read music from left to right. So when you're reading music, if you want to go down the scale, you don't go down this way, because it's read from left to right. You go up and then you go back down this way. So you have to be used to the fact that, I mean, if I were going to write like this, if I were to write a scale like this and just write it down from the top this way, well, you wouldn't read it that way. You'd read it from the lowest part up. So you have that progression up and down. And in this case, I have included, I've kept the notes like they were whole notes, basically, but I haven't put any coloring in them. It doesn't make any difference for what I'm trying to show you, but I have the fingerings for each of the notes underneath the note. And that would mean that it's a fingering chart. In a fingering chart, you have have the notes there, and then you have the fingerings underneath the notes so you can see what the correct way of fingering is, and that's the way you learn. You practice and you learn that. And in this case, with the F, as I've mentioned so many times before, if you are playing an instrument that's a Baroque instrument, then you have to add an extra finger. If you're not playing a Baroque instrument, you don't add an extra finger. That would be the difference also between the saxophone and the flute and the recorders, because they finger things so closely together. It's easy to transfer your knowledge from one instrument to another instrument. But what you don't get in the saxophones and the flutes is the fact that a Baroque instrument means a fingering change. With the saxophones, of course, with all their rods and pads and keys, you wouldn't be able to do that, because if you had to add an extra key, you would end up by playing another note. So that is a difference, but another difference between the recorder and the other woodwind instrument. So this would be a Baroque fingering for that F. And when you get up here to this F, I've done the same thing. It's a Baroque fingering, and so you have a Baroque fingering for this if you're playing a Baroque instrument. If you're not, then you play the regular way, and then your G, and then coming back down with the F, and this is the Baroque fingering, F, the Baroque fingering. So I've included all of that. Now you have to know whether you're playing a Baroque instrument or whether you're playing an instrument that's a German instrument in which you don't have to make that finger change. This is a German instrument. It is not Baroque. It's made in Germany. This actually came from Germany. And I play this is the F. And since it's not Baroque, I play that one finger. I do not add this third finger, but do you see the difference in the pitch? It's a little bit too low because you don't need to have that finger down. Since it is not a Baroque instrument, you only need to have that one finger. But if I'm to take, I'll use the red one. I haven't used this much. This is also a Baroque. It's a little bit too sharp. In order to get it in pitch, I need to put that finger down. There's quite a difference when you put that finger down in terms of the pitch of it. So in a Baroque instrument, you do have to add an extra finger. You do not have to do it for an instrument that's in German, made in a German style of fingering, because it'll be the correct pitch anyway without it. I remember when I started teaching at a school system, and they had a group of recorders. They wanted me to play or teach the students recorders or teach the students flutophones. They had both. We went for the recorders. I had a group of flutophones. I couldn't believe they were all twisted up and bent. And as it turned out, the teacher, the person who was directing the school, says, "Pat, I know we'll need to have new instruments. There's something wrong with these." And I looked at the flutophones, and they're like pretzels, you know. I couldn't believe what happened. How did these instruments get like that? Well, you see, he said it's like this. I knew they'd have to be sanitized. You have to sanitize your instrument. You know, you can't just have students play instruments that haven't been sanitized. You know, you have to get the germs off them. And she said, I did it the easy way. I stuck them in boiling water. And he had taken an inexpensive plastic instruments, a group of them, and stuck them in boiling water in order to disinfect them. And you know, and I couldn't believe it. Of course, they were bent and they were twisted and they looked awful. And the amazing thing was that they still played. So we went for something new. I said, let's try something different. So we went for the recorders, and he asked me, do you want to play Baroque or do you want to play German recorders? And at the time, I wasn't so sure of the differences, but I looked into it, and most people do play Baroque. Most instruments that you buy will be Baroque. They consider it to be slightly more accurate than the German recorders, but there's nothing wrong with the German recorders, and it's probably a little easier to teach. But at any rate, there's not that much difference between them, but just a little bit of difference to make a difference in the pitch. So you write from the lowest to the highest and then back down again, and these are the fingerings. Now, what I've done to show you fingerings of notes. This is the lowest C. Everything is covered. Everything. All of the fingers are closed. This is the D. And you leave the lowest note open, the lowest tone hole open. You just raise that finger and you have the rest of them down. And these little dots here are the tone holes that you use for your thumb. They would be the octave mechanism if you had an octave mechanism. And so when you're playing it and you see that closed, you have like all your fingers down for that C, and here is the thumb hole. That little side dot like is for the thumb hole, and when you get up higher you actually take it off, or you half hole it or something. So you just pick it up. If you're going from the low C, pick one up one at a time. D, E, F, because this is a Baroque, G, A, B, and C. It's really relatively simple to finger them. So you get to the D and you keep the lowest one open. The thumb hole is still closed. You get to the E and you pick up another one, so there are two that are open. The thumb hole is closed. The F, if it's a Baroque, you put down that extra finger. You have the top three. That would be, if you only had the top three, that would be the fingering for a G, but it's an F, so you add that F, and because it's a Baroque, you put it down. Now, if it's not a Baroque, you don't put it down. So B, A, G, F. And if it's Baroque, that also goes down. Then the G is only 3 with the thumb hole open. The A is only 2, with the thumb hole closed. The A is 2 with the thumb hole closed. The B is 1 with the thumb hole closed. The C is the second one down with the thumb hole closed. And I added the D, that's one note above the octave, but that thumb hole is open. And then when you get to the higher notes, and I didn't do octaves here, but when you get to the higher notes, you keep the thumb hole open, or you half hole it. So if I'm going to go from a C, here's your C, I remove the thumb from the thumb hole in the back, but keep this finger on. This gives me the D. Now, what if I want a C sharp between them? I put this finger down, and you have these two fingers down like it was an A, but the thumb hole remains open. Now, you have to remember that even though the recorder is a fairly simple instrument, it does get into some complicated fingering patterns if you're playing difficult music. And so it's just something that you need to remember. So let me go on with this. So you get to that D, and I repeat the D and the C here, and we just go back down. You add the 1 and with a thumb hole closed. Then you add another one, thumb hole closed. The third one, thumb hole closed. The fourth one, thumb hole closed with possibly an added key if you're playing a Baroque. If not, then you don't add that key and you get this fingering instead. The E, there's 3, 4, 5 closed, 2 open, thumb hole closed. Then D, you have all 6 of them closed except for that last one, thumb hole closed, and you get to the C. If you can remember, a scale is usually you pick up a note or you close a note. As they say, easy peasy, nothing to it. That's how you basically finger it. Now, what I've done, also just to make this a little more clear, this is my kind of version of what would be a recorder. I can't copy what somebody else is doing, so I made my own. And it's the same pattern. What I have here is the staff. This is where the note is, and this is what the note is, and this is what the fingering of the note is. So you start with your C, then you release that second finger. This is probably the most difficult to learn, the C, and you pick that C up and use this finger for the B. C, B, C, B. If you can remember that, then from that point, all you do is add finger after finger after finger after finger after finger. You know, and with the octaves, for a lot of the octaves, you half hole, here's your thumb, half hole it, just take the thumb down and expose the hole where the thumb hole is, just a little bit. You don't take it off completely, you'll get a completely different note if you do that. But if you take it off a little bit, it will automatically bounce a lot of those notes up an octave, and that's how you do the octaves. If you're playing the saxophone, if you're playing the flute, you have an octave mechanism on the back. With the recorders, you have just another hole. But you'd be surprised what you can do with that. You can take a lot of notes and bring them up. Now, when I'm playing that low D and I want the octave, I use the regular octave fingering, which is not the same. But a lot of the fingerings, you just bounce yourself up to an octave just by releasing the thumb hole a little tiny bit and getting yourself a half hole. When I play the D, I go from the low D. If I want to do an octave, I go from the low D, everything covered, and then I pick up and only have this note covered, and that pushes me up an octave. Now, if I want to go to an E, which is above the D by one note, I go back to the E fingering like it was a low E and just half hole the back. So so let's start with the C and D and the E. Here's the C, here's the D, look, no fingers, and then for the E, put it back down and half hole the back. You know, I have a lot of people who are asking me all the time, what's the simplest instrument I can play? And I always get taken back by that. But I always ask them, well, how good do you want to be? Because every instrument's going to have its challenges. And even with the recorder, they do get into complicated patterns. So if you C, D, E, and so you need to do exercises like that to get so familiar with the way that you finger that it just comes naturally. Because at the same time that you're fingering, you're also tonguing, and you're also slurring, and you're also breathing, and you're also counting time. And you're also aware of the fact that you're in a certain key signature, so you have a sharp or a flat, or maybe you don't. Maybe it's in the key of C. And all of these things you just kind of keep in your mind as you're playing. But as you play better and better and do more and more, it's just amazing that this becomes so automatic you don't even think about it. I pick up the instrument and I say, well, no, I have to do this, I have to do that, and I have to blow, and this is how hard it goes. Yeah, I don't do that. No one does that. When you learn it, you just pick it up and it's natural and you do it. And you know, it's an amazing thing when you see people playing like harp. You know, and they're so complicated, but they have like their keys, like a piano keyboard on them. But of course, it's all strings. It's not actually a keyboard. You wonder, you see all of those little strings, and they look so complicated. I think there's some color to them too. You wonder, how can somebody sit there and just play it? But after you know how to do it, it becomes natural. I need to watch my time, I guess. Also, what I did is I took and drew what would look a little bit like a flutophone, kind of a combination between a flutophone and a recorder, and held it to its side so you could see the thumb hole and if it's covered or not, plus the fingerings. Here's your second position, that's your C, and then you flip that up and you use the top note for the B and the thumb hole is closed. The A, you add one, thumb hole closed. G, you add one, thumb hole closed. F, you add one, you know, and the thumb hole is still closed, and you go all the way down. So you can see the fingerings on the side, you can see the mouthpiece, the labium of the instrument, and you can see the thumb hole in the back. That's what I really wanted to do. I wanted to draw some so you could see what the thumb hole was doing, or whether you were covering it or whether you were not covering it. And I didn't get up high enough. I just did it basically one straight scale, going from C to low C, but if I had gone to D, E, or F, then I would have half-holed that. That would have been half-holed. Or I would have maybe opened it up and not have it covered at all, like for the D. So it's just a case of learning how to do it. Here's the C. Here's the C. That's what we're working with, basically. These notes, and I only have two of them, but there are bunches more, go down into the bass clef. These are all treble clef notes. This middle C, it's called the low C for us, but it's the middle C. It has one ledger line through it that's halfway between the bass and the treble clef. And so the low C for us is the low that I've been playing, and we go up one octave. But recorders can go up 2 octaves. The tonettes, flutophones, song flutes, and so forth, just 1 octave, but the recorder's 2 octaves, and you've got the melodicas, ocarinas, penny whistles, and so forth, sasutos, that can go for that 2 octave range. This is considered to be a high C, and then flutes can go the rest of the way to the C above high C that the instruments that we're working in here can't play, but the regular flutes can. Now I'm going to close it here. We've run out of time, basically, and we'll continue learning how to play various notes and hand sequences and note sequences. So please join me next time.